The Avalon's next friend appeared in the form of Cincinnati auctioneer Harold Ephron. Ephron heard of the impending sale to the scrapyard. Believing both that the boat deserved a better fate, and seeing a marvelous promotional opportunity for his company, Ephron approached the bankruptcy court and offered to sell the boat at public auction. It took several determined attempts, but finally the court agreed to let him auction the boat. Ephron's wife was vice president of his company, and a friend of hers owned an ad agency. Together they launched a campaign to promote the coming auction. Cities across the country were informed of the sale, and one of those cities was Louisville, Kentucky. With the new Interstate 64 slated to go right by the riverfront, a number of concerned citizens were interested in drawing attention to and perhaps saving Louisville's historic cobblestone wharf. When Louisville Mayor Cowger decided that the city was not interested in the old steamboat, former Mayor Charles Farnsley contacted Jefferson County Judge Executive Marlowe Cook.
I felt that if we could find a way to draw attention to the riverfront, I wanted to do it. The boat was for sale, and we decided that that might be a good attraction and it might be something that we could use as a leverage to say, save the riverfront.
In a series of hasty phone conversations, Judge Cook got verbal approval to spend up to $40,000 for the boat. And off to Cincinnati they went. May 24th, 1962. Exactly 4 years to the day after the Emsworth Lock incident. More than 100 bidders filled the dance floor of the old Avalon. On stage was a friend of Harold Ephron's, a young auctioneer who had just started his own company, Garth Semple. The auction attracted a wide variety of potential buyers, with an equally wide variety of intentions for the old boat. Several cities looked at her as a potential museum or restaurant. One bidder even envisioned turning her into a discount department store. Thanks to Doc Holly, the boat could be made to run again. But of all the bidders, only Marlowe Cook seemed seriously interested in actually running the boat.
We never even debated whether we were going to use it to run or not. That was never a question. We were going to make it run.
Get your man in, Joe. I'm going to knock him down. 29 to the 30. Hold up. All right.
Prospects are excellent.
33, but you get 33 and a half, another half, another 33, but you get 33 and a half, 33 and a half. Are you all done, sir? 33 and a half. Thank you. 34 and 34 and 35. 34 but a bit 5, 5 but a bit 5, and I'm 4, and I'm 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5 but a bit 5, and I'm 34 but you get 35, 34 but a bit 35, and I'm 34, and I'm 5.
And then it was over, and the headlines next day told the tale. Jefferson County, Kentucky owned an old steamboat.
We didn't save the riverfront, but we got the Avalon.
The Avalon had come within $500 of becoming a restaurant in Knoxville, the intention of the second highest bidder. Parts of the boat were auctioned separately, and her old calliope went its separate way. But amazingly, no one even wanted her brass bell or her whistle, and they remain on the boat to this day. Within a few weeks, the Avalon was towed to Louisville, and her new career began. Every year of her existence, the boat has traveled somewhere. But 1962 was unique, for it was the only year in her entire history that she did not travel under her own power.
She was in terrible condition. When they towed her over to the weed lot there at River Service, the heel end of the stage was dragging in the river over the side of the boat. Everything on it was in bad shape. There were concrete patches in the hull. Anything that had any value at all was stolen or sold.
Her new career was certainly off to a shaky start. It was not a universally popular purchase, and more than a few eyebrows were raised at the seemingly frivolous use of taxpayer dollars.
It was a very controversial buy at the time, and a lot of people here in the community were up in arms. They didn't understand why the county judge would take $34,000, the taxpayers' money, and go out and buy an old boat. And as the story goes, some of the folks actually would park their car on River Road, walk over, and they'd park their weeds, and they'd park park the bushes, and they'd look over and they'd see the Avalon. Well, she was in rough shape. She was a sight to see from what I understand. And some of the folks would become fairly enraged once they saw the wreck that $34,000 bought.
A politically motivated taxpayer lawsuit was filed challenging the county's authority to buy the boat at all. The cost of the Avalon per taxpayer worked out to something like 6 cents per person. By and large, though, the public was in favor of the boat, at least those who hadn't gotten a good look at her. The city of Louisville soon joined into a cooperative arrangement with the county to manage and operate the boat. Judge Cook appointed an advisory panel of local business leaders to decide how best to use the Avalon. Former Belle of Louisville board chairman Clyde Glass.
So I called him back. I was, well, I'll take a place on that board, but I want to be the first to tell you I didn't think you should have bought it.
Someone was needed to oversee the actual repairs, and it was C.W. Stahl, a lifetime veteran of the river, who suggested Alan Bates.
He suggested to Judge Marlowe Cook that I would be a good person to send to the Belle of Louisville to start the restoration. They expected me to clean her up, get rid of some of the trash or all of it, and get her in pretty good shape.
While the administrative details were being worked out, slowly the boat herself began to come back to life. Estimates to completely repair the Avalon ran as high as $85,000. But the final cost proved considerably less as more and more volunteers came forward to donate time and materials. Almost as an afterthought, it occurred to someone that the boat should have a new name.
In New London, Connecticut, I met Nancy Remmers from Louisville, born and raised in Louisville, lived in Audubon Park. Everybody at Connecticut College called Nancy Belle because she had a southern accent. And when it came time to name the Avalon, it wasn't very hard for me to figure out how to name it the Belle of Louisville.
On October 15, 1962, the Belle of Louisville was officially born. By November, the legal issues had been settled, and shortly afterwards the Belle went into dry dock at Jeff Boat for the long overdue hull repairs.
That it was estimated that 80% of her hull was concrete, which is a patching. You can use concrete to patch leaks in her hull, and 80% of the hull had a concrete patch in it. So they cut the concrete out of the boat and put new plate in over at Jeff Boat. She spent the winter over there essentially, and then came back.
About January 1963, they engaged Paul Underwood as master of the boat, and Paul was an old-timer, and he'd been everywhere and done everything. It was a good choice. He hired Dave Creselius as chief engineer, and Dave got the engines and boilers in shape.
By the spring of 1963, the Belle was operable, but just barely.
I never will forget the day we were going to take it on a trial run, and that thing started up and the paddle wheel started and we pulled away from the riverfront. I was aft and Nancy Cook was forward, and I started walking forward as we were moving up under the Kennedy Bridge, and Nancy was coming back and tears were coming down her face, and I hugged her and I said, "My gosh, it works." And she said, "Thank goodness it works."
With the lawsuit settled and the Belle finally running, public opposition to the boat largely disappeared. Judge Cook had also devised a novel plan for dealing with his most outspoken critics. The boat had cost 6 cents per taxpayer, and whenever someone complained, he simply paid them off from a jar of pennies he kept in a drawer of his desk.
Some of them insisted on a check, and it's very interesting because I wrote several checks for 6 cents, but none of them were ever cashed. I think they just wanted to say they got their 6 cents and they could show everybody that they got it.
It had taken nearly a year to get the boat running again, and public interest was beginning to lag. Something spectacular was needed to attract attention again. In a city known for horse racing, what could be more natural than a good old-fashioned steamboat race? It had been more than 30 years since a highly publicized steamboat race had been run on the Ohio River. And what better opponent for the oldest working steamboat on the inland rivers than the second oldest steamboat?
Really and truly, all of the credit for the steamboat race belongs to a delightful man by the name of C.W. Stahl. C.W. knew all the people on the Delta Queen, knew Betty Blake, who was their publicity director. And it was through C.W., really and truly, that the race started, and we put out the challenge.
Tying the event into the annual Kentucky Derby festivities would ensure publicity. But at first, Derby Festival officials were less than enthusiastic.
They were not crazy about the steamboat race, and they didn't really want it part of the festival. And I really did not learn until much later that in the parlance of the old horse bettor, a fixed race is called a boat race. And consequently, the Churchill Downs people felt that the connotation of having a boat race as part of the Derby Festival week associated with the Kentucky Derby was just something they wanted no part of. Obviously, it's now a very integral part of it, but I did not know that, and I found it rather comical.
The Delta Queen herself had been struggling financially, so the publicity value alone of a race was irresistible. April 30th, 1963. While the Belle could run, she was really in no condition to race, and the outcome proved it. As the Belle still struggled upriver, the Queen reached the turnaround point and came back. Her calliope played "Goodbye, Little Girl, Goodbye" as she passed the Belle again on her way to an easy victory. For the Belle, in military terms, it was a tactical defeat, but an overwhelming strategic victory.
One of the networks that covered it by helicopter estimated that there were 250,000 people on each side of the river. We even beat the attendance at the Kentucky Derby that year, so